Hello, and welcome to another week of the Story Dogs podcast. I'm your co-host, Mike.
And I'm your co-host, Alex.
And today we are diving into Skyward Volume 2, Here, There Be Dragonflies, by Henderson, Garbett, and colorist Antonio Favela. Yeah. Yep. And Simon Boland, who, not to be overlooked, because I think there are some things where, I guess this is a collaboration between the letterer and the writer. There are things that she kind of gets from her dad's journal occasionally, but no one is dumping a full page of chicken scratch handwriting that we have to read.
Yeah.
Much appreciated, especially coming off of Manifest Destiny, which was legible, but you kind of had it no cursive, and you did not taken for granted now.
And on Manifest Destiny, like that was part of like a feature, not a bug, right? They're literally writing in journals. That was part of the story construction and conceit of that book. One thing I did want to go back and talk about, something you mentioned last week about the lack of narration, like text boxes. And I was thinking about that, and I think I mentioned, there's some at the end there. But when I went back and looked at it, and it especially stuck out in this volume, there actually are no narration boxes in the term of we're not sitting in anybody's head. Right. Anytime there are narration boxes, there are text boxes, but it's simply someone speaking to someone else off panel. So you're getting the thoughts of someone who's relaying their thoughts. I think the part that jumped out at me in this volume was when Edison is talking with Barris. Right. And they're kind of flashing through, like, they're having their confrontation about, about Edison's parents being rich and blah, blah, and what Willa's plan is to bring back gravity, yada, yada, yada. They have some pages there where there are text boxes there, but that's clearly part of the exchange. You're not sitting in someone's head and reading their thoughts. They're expressing their thoughts. So anytime that, I always said gimmick, not a gimmick. Anytime that style is used in this book, you're still having a dialogue. Someone is expressing this. You're never sitting in someone's head, which I think is an interesting approach. And I'm not saying that's a novel approach. I'm not saying it's unique, but it is a choice that they clearly made, that we're not going to have someone's interior thoughts. We're not going to have them debate and work through things just inside their own head. All the text we read, it's all going to be perceived by the reader as being spoken aloud. And I think that's a cool thing when a book makes a choice like that. Because one of the
I think benefits, it's a hallmark of good writing. I'm not going to the the caricature of Robert McKee in the movie adaptation where, he says, I pulled up the quote, because in the movie, he's played by Brian Cox. He refers to voiceover as flaccid, sloppy writing. And the full quote is even better. But Robert McKee is also against it, but only if it's replacing what should have been accomplished through dialogue or action. And I think that's the line.
1,000% agree with that. But I think what I was to say is one of the assets or benefits of working as medium is that you can get someone's interior thoughts. And oftentimes that can be that can heighten the story for the reader, has more engagement because you can sit in these moments and just get a character's thoughts, versus having to do it in live action and you have voiceover, which always ends up feeling a little, even though they functionally accomplish the same thing, there is a bit of a disconnect when you're watching moving images and hearing voiceover versus when you're reading text on a page, because whether you're reading a word balloon or a dialogue box, maybe because you, the consumer, are the input's the same versus when you're watching on a screen, you're watching images happen and just disembodied voice. So maybe that's where a disconnect comes from. But I said I like that they made a choice about that. So we're never inside anyone's head. We only know what Willa, I would say specifically Willa, she's our main character. We only know what she's thinking because she's expressing it, And sometimes that comes off as her talking to herself, but people do that.
I mean, yes. Which I prefer the. I mean, like I'm thinking of the book Strange Adventures, and I would say a good portion of that book happens in Mr. Terrific's head, but having him just do monologues with the T-spheres, it's like it's a little tropey, but it's so much better than just reading page-long blocks of a character's thought while watching them walk through a hall.
No.
Like that was such a smart choice from Tom King, who very much loves like an interior monologue.
He loves monologue, or he whether it's interior monologue or a journal. He loves those big. Absolutely. But yeah, there is something slightly different about that, and and in that book too, Mr. Terrific he has a little narrative armor in that by voicing it out there, the T-probes they're recording it.
They're recording it and they're interacting with him. He's got like a full Jarvis style.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Thing,
so,
which was something that
it's
like,
cover.
Yeah, and
it's cover for. Oh wait, I just read 3 pages of exposition.
Right. But Jon Favreau understood the same thing when he made the Iron Man movie of like, we want to be in Tony's head.
Yeah.
But it's a lot of heavy lifting and not a very interesting movie to watch him sitting typing at a computer. So we have to give him a personality that's not really going to push back on him. Like, it's not going to be for like Jarvis is never for character growth, right? Yeah. He's for technology growth. So anyway, so I don't really know how to articulate this. I am very much enjoying this book, but something about it is just a little off. And I still think it's like, it is a masterclass in writing in terms of like, if you wanted to learn, if you want to follow the textbook algorithm of how to write beats and drop them, this is following that to a T.
And was my first note on this volume. Yep.
Yeah. And it's just like setup, payoff, twist, setup, payoff, twist, betrayal, suspicion, resolution, like all of these things. And it's just juggling them seamlessly. Like it's just perfection from a writing standpoint. And I think the problem is I don't know if there's been enough to make me care about like what actually happens in the story. Like I finished volume 2. Personally, I don't really care whether she restores gravity or not. And it seems like because I don't think her motive is good enough. So I think like a lot of the things in this story are like, there's nothing technically wrong by that, but there's just a lot of paint by number story choices.
I think that's completely fair because you're right. Her motivation for trying to fix the world and bring back gravity, it isn't because it's solely because her dad wanted her to and then died. Like that was her as far as she knows, her dad's dying wish,
who she's reconnected with for 4 minutes here.
Yeah. Well, no, hold up. I do think there is implication that she goes and visits him, like brings him food and stuff like that.
I don't. That's true. Like she definitely does, but I assume that's more out of pity than a genuine bond.
Sure,
or some sense of obligation.
But it's I don't think in volume 1. I don't think that was like the first time they'd seen her in years. Like I think she sees him regularly. Yeah.
No. But like I need a character to like own the stakes personally rather than inherit them like vicariously. Well, I think that's like on one hand, like what they're doing is not dissimilar from like Star Wars A New Hope. You're kind of like, Luke has the generic hatred of the Empire, which you would expect from a rural farmer on Tatooine. Just like, stay in your lane, get out of our business, yada, yada, yada. But he really takes up the cause because Ben Kenobi. And Ben Kenobi dies, and that's his motivation to double down and be like, oh, we're taking out the Death Star. So I'm like, I guess, like, but there's something different about that. Like, I don't have that critique of that. So I'm trying to articulate it. I can't quite find it, but it's like, it's just that I don't feel that she has real ownership over the story.
And I think this is where I think you're right, because and this probably bothers me a little less than you, but I absolutely see your point, because they haven't presented Willa's case for any reason of why to do this from any larger sense. And they also haven't shown that Willa hasn't put any thought into what would restoring gravity mean. Does she think, what does she think that means is going to happen? Does she think that means that whatever inequities in the world are going to go away? Okay. Because that seems wild. That would be wildly naive. What does she think is going to happen if she's successful? Whether it's a long mission, arduous, or if it's literally flipping a switch, they haven't established what they think she thinks is going to happen after that. And if the point is that she hasn't considered that and she doesn't know, that's fine. But then the story needs to establish.
Blindside her with it. Yeah.
Yes. The story then needs to be about her coming to realization, in which case we are now not invested in grappling back. We're invested in her understanding or dealing with the potential ramifications. And they haven't set that up either. So I totally understand what you're saying, in that her mission right now feels really hollow, because I think it is hollow, because she hasn't grappled with, we haven't been shown as the reader her grappling with all the implications and now of what that could mean. And we got a little bit of that though in this volume, again in that scene with Edison and Barrows, when Barrows tells Edison what her plan is, bringing back gravity, and him being and Barrows talking to Edison and being like, that means for you, right? Like, I mean, she wants it may be better for some people, but for you personally in this situation, it's going to be a lot worse, because you're not going to be able to move around as easily, And so it's clear that the other people in the world have thought about this, but because they haven't put that on Willa yet, there is a disconnect with the story.
Okay, and I'm thinking through it in real time.
I do think that's a whole.
I don't like external processing. I like coming prepared to things. But this is me continuing the Star Wars analogy. When Luke gets in the X-Wing to go knock down the Death Star, what does he think will happen when they beat the Empire? Like, we actually don't know, and he probably doesn't know either. He just knows Empire bad. I got to beat it. So I'm like, on some level, that is like the adolescent protagonist. But Star Wars is like half coming of age, half. Well, it's a huge hybrid of lots of things, and I don't think Skyward is really. Skyward has not really laid out hero's journey. It's not really coming of age. Yeah. So it's kind of in a no man's land, but still faithfully executing all the things it should be doing. Yeah. So I think I don't know. I'm like, again, this is all under the guise of me very much enjoying it. Like, it's a page turner, and I just mow through this book.
I want to go to, we talked about, started this off with about laying out story beats and all the ways that it goes through. I'm curious, since this is the first time you're reading this, what was your kind of narrative journey with the character of Lucas, in terms of like, when he's introduced, what do you think about him? And as they slowly reveal bit by bit, it's like, they're just they're exposing a little bit more of his story, and it's like, oh, you trust him, now you don't. Wait, now you trust him again. Wait, now you don't trust. Wait, you're back to trusting him. So, what was your journey with that? Were you writing with the creative team and kind of with Willa and Edison as they were exposing more and more, or were you on it from the jump? Be like, no matter what they show me, there's going to be a twist at the end. Kind of, where were you at with that?
Okay, so I was like, Lucas is the big guy, the rival one, who gets the leader of the Wolverine shards of glass, and that was really good. Yeah. It's just like, Lucas Logan. I was like, had they just named him Logan and then given him that panel, would have been next level. But to me, when I first encountered him, what I thought was, this is their District 13 from Hunger Games, like the thing the government told them doesn't exist anymore. Like, there's no point in resisting us because you'll get wiped out like all those people got wiped out. yada yada yada.
That's a good comp. That's a good. I said that's a really good comp. That's
so
strong.
that's how I was tracking it, which made they got me, like the writers, because the jaw-dropping reaction of arriving back at the farm and seeing Barrow Agriculture.
Yeah.
And she says, I think we forgot to ask who the farmers work for. I was like, oh, can you imagine if it was like, President Snow having a spa day at 13 when you finally find 13? Like, that's what it was. So like
his vacation home.
I like, to me, I took it as validation of like, one, these guys are still setting up beats perfectly, and I'm reading it the way they're meaning it. So like which I think is why like the story character piece of it has been so disappointing to me, because I'm like, I'm tracking with every move you guys make and really enjoying it. I just wish there was a little more meat on the bone.
You're track all the individual beats, but the big overall arc less so.
Yeah, I don't care what happens. Yeah. I don't really care about Kansas City. Frankly, I don't care about Chicago.
Exactly. Yeah.
It's like I don't care about Chicago. I don't care about Gravity. I don't care about anything. I like Willa. Like I'm not rooting for her to win because I don't even know what winning is 2/3 of the way through the series. Like, she needs to figure out what winning is, and then I will likely be on board with it. So anyway, yes, like that whole thing, and then hinting at the love triangle. It was like, on one hand, a little bit obligatory. On the other hand, I'm glad they didn't ignore it, and I'm glad they didn't make a meal of it. So I thought it was just the perfect amount of like, he pulls him outside to have a talk, and he's like, oh, there's nothing between us. And he's like, really? It seems like you're doing quite a lot here and working against your own best interest. All for.
Can I admit something here?
Yeah.
In this reread, so when I first read this book, I didn't know who Joe Henderson was. I didn't know he worked in television, didn't know anything about that. Again, I picked this book up because I saw the art and I was like, I loved it and I'm in. Knowing now on this reread that Joe Henderson is mainly a TV writer and producer, and not that he is creating comics solely to have them adapted, because if that were the case, he'd be Mark Miller and that would be terrible. But
better you going to say it. I was like, there's another name for that, and we'll leave it alone.
But the fact, but knowing that he is a television person, and without it would be impossible to ignore the fact that if he's creating something in this medium, he has eyes potentially, right, to try and bring it to the TV or movie screen. It would be absurd to dismiss that entirely, right? Like, not saying he has any ulterior motives, but like, this dude, his day job is writing and creating television, and not just that, but also like adapting other people's work into film and television. So why wouldn't it be crazy for him to write his own comic with the thought of maybe adapting down the line? And reading it this time and seeing that love triangle set up between Willa, Edison, and Lucas, knowing what I know now, I read that and was like, this is season 2 of a television show.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, it was, we're putting this here because we're going to introduce this, because I've seen when this character come in.
You have money
on so many shows
to put more people on the cast.
I saw it in a very cynical TV sense of like, right, this is how you spice up the show again. You bring in another actor, someone in here. You see it all the time on television. Not saying it's a good or bad thing inherently, but I couldn't help but read it that way. But I will agree with you when you say what you appreciated about it, in that it threaded the needle very, very deftly of, we're not going to pretend this isn't happening. Like, the thing you're reading is happening, but we're not going to sit in this. And this isn't what the book is about. And I think what I enjoyed about that is, whatever that triangle is, ultimately had no effect on what the resolution at the end of this book was. It didn't come into play. The choices and decisions that every character made was actually independent of whatever feelings they may have had in the moment, an issue or two earlier. That everyone made pragmatic decisions, which I think is interesting because oftentimes you don't see that. And maybe that goes back to what you were saying a little bit earlier of like, is it a coming of age book? Is it a chosen one kind of book kind of thing? If it were a coming of age book, the choice that Willa's choice would have been about which do you side with versus a strictly pragmatic approach. Before, right. There would have been more conflict there from a character standpoint because, she had this connection with this guy and he's idealistic and yada, yada, yada. That didn't play a part in the narrative aspect, but you're right. It doesn't go unnoticed. It doesn't go unmentioned. We have to talk about this thing because everyone knows it's happening, but it's just a thing that happened and not the thing that happened. And I did appreciate that part.
Yeah. Okay. So it sounds like we have a lot of the same praise, a lot of the same friction with this book. Art continues to be beautiful.
Love it.
The writing from a very technical stance is basically perfect. I think it's just kind of a no heart book. And there are little heartwarming moments of humor, again, sprinkled in to perfection, like just the amount you would want a book like this. There's just one little piece missing, but it's such a foundational piece. It's like we're on, floor 3 and you found a crack in the foundation. So it's like, I guess I'll just enjoy this for what it is going forward.
Yeah, I think there is, I think it's a little hollow at the center. I think that's the metaphor I'm going with. That everything around it, I think what it's built on is really strong. But there's at the core, they haven't filled in the true heart of what the story is, and that is not just the character of Willa, but as we said, her motivations. And I think individually, as you read through the issues, I think I'm with you on this, and it's incredibly enjoyable. I going back and rereading it now again. I think I mentioned I probably reread this at least maybe one time prior to the first time I read it. So maybe the third time I read through it. I still really enjoy going through it. But when I get to the end of the story and you realize and you start thinking about what happens next, where the story's going next, I'm interested on you got to remember what happens in the story, like what the beats are. But then it's like I don't actually care if she wins or not, because you're right. I don't know what winning looks like. And I don't know. It makes me think a little bit that maybe the creators don't quite know what winning looks like. And I want to draw your attention to the very, very end of the volume, of volume 2, where there's a little note there from Joe Henderson.
I read the note and then I read the script because like all of it is it's all perfect.
Yeah. But that little note there, the read I got off in that, and if you're reading in single issue or if you're reading in like the complete edition, I don't know if
it was
that
a little
note
weird,
is
right?
included.
It was like a little bit of hey, here's the course correction we're trying for.
Exactly. No, it said like we were building to something, and we got to the end of issue 10, volume 2 here, and it didn't quite feel right to me. And this is the writer, Joe Henderson, talking, said it didn't quite feel right to me. And then something came to me, and that led to all these other stories of what the next arc is going to be. And I'm not saying creators can't do that. It's their book. They can do whatever they want with their world. But I do find it notable that the things that we're talking about in the story, that, hey, maybe something's missing here. What aren't we connecting to? Are they setting things up and not connecting them? We're a little lost on some of these parts. And to read what Joe Henderson say, that maybe he was feeling that same way too, that he was starting to write and set things up and kind of realize, I don't know if that's the way the story is going to go. I don't know if I like that. And then for him to have, in the middle of it, have this sort of like, oh, wait, what if I went this way with the story? And then for him and Lee Garbett to kind of talk about it, like, yeah, okay, let's go that way and see what happens. And not so much take like a 90-degree turn away from the story, but like kind of branch off at like 30 degrees. We're going down this road and it's like, well, let's go a little bit to the right and see where that takes us. Maybe that's part of it, that they started down a path that they maybe weren't 100% in on. And maybe that's where some of the disconnect comes from.
Yeah, I read that note and I feel the way I feel when you're on a plane and the pilot is like, there's some pretty strong headwinds, so we're going to kind of go, southwest rather than straight or southeast instead of straight east to like mitigate that, and then we'll come back around. And I'm like, yeah, as long as we get there, I don't really care.
Exactly. Yep.
But so it's like this wasn't the planned route. Don't panic, as if people were tracking the route that closely in their seats.
Right. They're not making a U-turn. They're not going
this
to.
This isn't about how she wants to remove even more gravity now. Like, it's just like you like decided to try to paint. So, but I think the thing was the near miss was he said something like, I knew where she was heading. I already figured out the crazy journey about Willa was about to embark on for the third act. I had all the pieces figured out, yet something wasn't right. It reminded me of issue 5 when I suddenly realized Nate wasn't going to continue on the journey with Willa. When their story told me that Willa needed to explore this leg on her own, that time something had to be removed. It broke my heart, but it's necessary for Willa to truly grow as a person. Split infinitive, granted. To stand on her own 2 legs, or at least float on them. Yada yada yada. I'm like, I think what surprised me about this note was him saying like, how invested he is in this character. Because I think that's the piece that's not coming through,
and that could be
like it broke his heart to kill her dad. Like we didn't give a crap. Like we perceived that it was meaningful to her, and then it was going to become like a tropey. Well, I have to do this for my father, and it's like at some point there needs to be the confrontation of like, do you want this? Like, do you want this for yourself? Do you own this world-changing thing you're about to do? This is too big of a thing for you to do for someone else's feelings.
Absolutely. I agree with that 1,000%.
And so, and I kind of suspect it's coming, but coming in the third act, it seems like more of a second act thing.
And this is where I think
now, if you were reading this in single issue, you would not have known this was only going to 15, right?
I don't believe so. I don't know if they ever.
I would have assumed they had the runway. I think I'm being more critical now because I know they don't really have the runway.
And that is part of it in the reread is, and I think I mentioned this back in the Zero, this idea that I feel this story would have benefited from just at least one more arc. And I think we'll definitely talk about it next week when we get to the finale and how the book ends up. But when you get to the end of this book and end of this volume and know there's only one volume left, you're right. It sets expectations in your mind because we think of this as like a 3-act play, right? Knowing there's just one arc left there and seeing what they've laid already, there is a sense of like, something is missing here. And I think that's what I said in the Zero app about it. I think the story would have benefited from just at least one more arc. If this thing went 20 issues and there was one more arc for Willa to really explore the idea and the world of kind of what she's undertaking, this task actually is, and then your final arc being the confrontation and actual dealing, it feels like there's too much to throw in at the end.
Well, especially since the big thing that I'm waiting for is not what happens in Kansas City or Chicago. I need something to happen in the character. And right now she's still just managing other people's motives.
Single-minded.
Yeah. But like, she's just like the steward of this motive rather than feeling the motive herself. Like, she's kind of a Frodo, right? It's like, I'm thrown into this quest because someone else asked me to. Not quite as intrinsically noble as Frodo.
But with Frodo, you can be like, all that bad stuff in the world that everyone knows is bad, we can get rid of that. Versus, hey, it's a lot. The world is different, but
it's a mixed bag now. Yeah.
Well, I think, you know what? Maybe this is what it is. The world having reduced gravity isn't what makes the world bad. This world. That is not inherently the problem. The problem still inherently is still people. It is, the fact that we're now in low gravity, that didn't automatically make the world terrible. Now, some weird stuff happens, like they decided that insects are the growth of insects is determined or restricted by gravity. That doesn't make any scientific sense. But like we said last week, magical world, whatever. But the world itself isn't inherently bad. There's no evil in the world just because gravity got reduced. The evil in the world, the evil and the inequity of this world is the same the way that's in our world, right? It's a bunch of rich people wanting to stay rich and keep poor people poor. It's just that it's flipped now, right? I love the little bit there when there's one little line where Willis says she grew up in the penthouses of Chicago.
Yeah.
With the idea that the penthouses are the slums because they're up in the sky.
It was a very nice.
There's a nice play. Yeah, there's a nice play on words there.
And resisting the urge to draw attention to yourself and have someone be like, the penthouses. It's like, no, like you don't need that. And that's how
in this world,
the world building is done. Yeah.
In this world at 20 years, everyone knows what that means. She just has to say it for someone. Oh yeah, I know what that means. Yeah.
And I think again, that's something a lesser writer would have an audience avatar character who's new to the world be the buddy cop, who has to have every line like that explained to them, or you get like a fourth wall type reaction out of that character every time something like that is said. And the absence of that moves this book up quite a bit in my estimation.
There is a trusting of the world that you, the reader, by this point in the story, you get the circumstances of the world. So we don't got to explain that again. They're not holding your hand through that to make sure you remember, hey, over in the cities, remember that stuff? Everything was backwards, right? Rich people on the ground, poor people in the sky. Remember that? We don't got to do that. We don't got to go back to that. They can just introduce little things like the trains and things like that, right? With the seats, on the side there. So, centrifugal force pushes you back and you're against the walls and things like that, not on the ground. So little touches like that where you don't have to explain what's going on. You can show it visually. And then through your understanding of what they've already shown in the world, you figure out what's happening. And again, it doesn't have to follow perfect scientific rules and logic, because we know this book isn't about that. And again, if we try to interrogate some of those things, it falls apart. Like I'm not going to pretend it doesn't fall apart.
There's
it falls apart completely.
One sentence explanation of how large man-eating bugs came into existence, and I was like, that works. Like keep going. Like don't slow me down. Like let's just go.
It's because that's the thing. So we talked about last week. If you assume this world is more of a fantasy world, not our world, slightly different, because that explanation doesn't make scientific sense. But as long as everyone in the world agrees, oh, right, that, of course, that's the rule. Like that.
Their scientists have looked into it, and that's the bottom line. Yeah. Well, that and the thing is, like, they could be wrong. Like the average person is often like, there are flat earther conventions right now. So there are people who, if someone were telling a story in our world at present, following people who are all gathering and talking knowingly about the world being flat, you'd be like, I'm sorry, that's not scientifically accurate. It's like, yeah, characters are wrong. Like they can be wrong. So I think there's also that out if they ever need it.
There is the pushback saying that is that regardless of what the reasoning is, there are actually giant bugs in the sky right now in their world.
Right, which I guess is different than the flat Earth. So, however,
but also
like it could have been nuclear radiation or something else,
It could have been, but then why are the cows the same size? If this thing affects the insects and the bugs, what happened to the birds? What about the slightly larger bugs that eat the smaller bugs? There are tons of questions about humans. I'm curious, did you read, I don't know if we talked about this, but did you read Artemis by Andy Weir?
I just did. Last week.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. For those that don't know that as Andy Weir puts it himself, that's the other Andy Weir book. It's the one in between The Martian and Project Hail Mary.
But because Martian I thought was okay. Project Hail Mary I thought was like damn near perfection, and Artemis was like somehow Artemis the okayest book.
It is. It's a different setup, different conceit, but it is set on a moon colony. Right. And one of the things they talk about there, because Andy Weir obviously is hard sci-fi, but one of the things he talks about is if you're a child or who you're not supposed to come to the moon in that book. like before a certain age, because the reduced gravity means you won't have the proper like bone density in your body because you don't have gravity and things like that.
Right. And like every time our character is like thinks about returning to Earth, she's reminded she would have to take this strict regimen of pills and things like that in order to like not die upon receiving that surge of gravity and trying to live there.
Exactly. So again, that's a hard sci-fi approach. We've run the numbers what actually happened. Skyward is the magical part of that version of that, because I was thinking about it in the beginning of volume 2 with the dad and the kid on the train, right? That little girl's got to be what, like 5-6 years old, maybe. You're like, okay, so like your bones are basically hollow if you grew up in a world. If you were born into a world with effectively no gravity, you don't have the bone density there, and you will never get that. Again, this book isn't about that. But the problem with that, the nitpick with that is, if you use pseudoscience to explain why mosquitoes are gigantic and hunt people now, why aren't you using pseudoscience to explain other things? You know,
right?
It's like there's a little bit of a give and take of when they explain something. It's fine that they explain something, but by explaining one thing, it draws attention to the things they aren't explaining. So it's almost like explain everything or explain nothing. Kind of right. It's a bit of a catch-22. And again, these are total nitpicks because the book isn't about that. I'm sure part of it was like, hey, you know, it'd be really cool if we drew giant mosquitoes that came and killed people. And Lee Garbett was probably like, yeah, that sounds rad. Let me draw
make that 2 books in a row for this podcast where people had that idea, right?
That, you know what? Solid point. Didn't think about that. Although Lee Garbett probably didn't say that he's British. He probably said that that's much true. Cooler.
But
you're right. Yeah, the idea.
What's the Rosie Marks phrase from last summer? That's hot kaiju summer. We're having a hot kaiju spring.
Yeah. And I do wonder though. Again, if part of that is just man, let's draw something cool. What would be dangerous out there? And you just work backwards from that. And I got no problem with that creative method. You know, because we got some killer pages. I thought there were some, maybe because there's something about being in the outdoors and drawing nature or versions of nature. There's something different about that than when you're just drawing buildings and all that stuff there, you know, when you can really flex and you can have some real fun, I think also with color palette, because you're dealing in a fantasy world, right? You know, when you're in the city of Chicago, you're treating buildings and things are still feel a little constrained by what the world looks like. But now you're out in the wilderness and you can draw all kinds of crazy stuff and you can have all kinds of crazy colors. And I think some of the splash pages and some of the visuals in this volume, I think were just phenomenal.
Yeah. I mean, certainly no complaints about art beats, things like that. So I think it's just something in the premise of this book. And yet, like, despite having not hooked me, I'm still more interested as I go. So it's just like, man, it's one small conversation early on away from being like an all-time book. And I suspect it will be 5 to 10 issues shy of being that level too. Because the size and scope of this quest, granted smaller cast, but I would say the size and scope of this quest should at least be on par with Paper Girls, which was like 30-ish.
That was 30 issues. Yeah, there were 30 issues. Yep. Which is why I already like pre-caveating, being like, I feel this book would have been just a huge step more, just at least more volume, 5 more issues here to really breathe. If it were 20 issues total, this book could really take a leap. It really could, and go from a really enjoyable read to, I think, like a really great read. You know, because right now I think it's a really enjoyable read. It's a fun book. Again, part of it is turning your brain off a little bit and just being along for the ride. And I think maybe that's what you're experiencing. A little bit of cruise control, right? And it's only when you stop and think about a little deeper, you're like, oh, there's something missing there. But in the moment, right? In the moment as you're reading it, you're enjoying what's happening beat to beat. And I think that there's something to be said for that. There's something to be said for a book that does that. that just gives you that enjoyment as you go through it. And maybe, you put a little deeper thought after you, and you're like, well, why are we doing that? What's happening there? And then it falls apart a little sometimes there. But if the journey as you're going through, if that's a good one, if that works, and it does for me, and I think it does for you as well, you're going to keep going with it. But it's not going to elevate it to like a top tier story. It's not going to get that high.
I would recommend this to a lot of my friends who read comics. I would never tell someone who doesn't read comics to get into this, because I don't think it's a great representation of what sci-fi can be in the comic format.
I think there are better options of that, and not saying this is a bad option, but there are better ones.
No, but like if you're into this kind of stuff, it's basically an essential read, because it's like, this is a blast. This is objectively a blast, and it's gorgeous to look at. And again, the beats are like basically perfectly executed. Okay, I have one more minor nitpick, and I think this is two sides of the same coin here. Is they go to the trope of, I have to set the villain free and work together. And usually you get some kind of like House of Mirrors thing where you learn something about the villain that makes him more complicated, makes him a little more sympathetic, more human. And you realize like, they actually share this motive. They're just coming down a different side of things, and they're two sides of the same coin. You know, the ideal being like a Black Panther Killmonger type thing. Here, this happens, and very briefly, and there's nothing. Like, he's still just generic villain guy. Yeah. And it's so pointless. And then there's like the tropey woman whose husband was lost on the recovery of them being the one to find them. And being
brother.
Like,
well, it was brother, but you're
brother,
right.
It's like, that's a blah 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 character, right? Yeah. And to give the blah 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 character a payoff moment, or try to, in a matter of like 5-6 panels, is just like
not even 2 pages, maybe. Yeah,
it's not a character worth naming. And
and I do think, would it help the overall story some if Barrows were less of just like a caricature of a villain?
Yes, because he would be something to push against.
Okay, like,
I think she would have to think through what she's doing a little bit more if he wasn't so blatantly generically evil.
Yeah,
because she's trying to do something blatantly generically good.
Yeah,
and she's not even
just like
doing that.
He's the most boring, bland rote part of Lex Luthor.
It's like none of
the depth.
It's like they wrote a little like
the surface level only.
It's like they wrote a placeholder, and it's one of those things that they like. I kind of wonder now, because I think this trend, even since this book has been published, is a little more common. If they had done an interstitial issue at issue 6 or at issue 11, that was like his backstory.
Yeah,
that added some complexity to it. That would just kind of like rechristen everything that happened before. And but the problem is, it's not whether he has substance or not. It's Willa needs to confront whatever substance he has in order to develop her own substance. And that's I think even the interstitial I would have complained about if Willa doesn't get the information.
You definitely would have complained about that. But no, you're right though. The interstitial is only important if Barrows is an equal character in the story.
Yes.
Like if you're also telling his story, then you have to know what it is. You're right. What is important, agree 1,000%, is Barrows needs to be more, not for Barrows' sake, but for Willa's sake. That is we're aligned on that entirely. That you need more of a villain there, so our protagonist has something to mirror against or with or anything. He's such a caricature of a bad guy, of the billionaire bad guy, which again, probably the point. Just we want to show evil billionaire guy. But there is no depth to him. Is that like at every turn, his answer is going to be, I made the tough call, and I made a lot of money on it, but look, where would we be if I didn't do this? Mm-hmm.
which
you just give him that single mind track.
Like he didn't,
but there's no
as
other,
far as
like,
we know, he did not delete gravity. He just anticipated it and profited off of it. There are actually worse villains, and now he's intentionally blocking it being restored, because he's in control of the social order of the world, all capital and yada yada yada.
So
anyway,
again, the idea
their
of just
team up was a chance to do something.
If he had a little depth,
right? Their team up was a chance to do something,
and that was like 2 pages.
This is 2 pages. It would have been cool to see an inside the guts of the insect they were hiding in, of them, like with like her elbow in his face, like writhing around in purple guts. Like it would have been. It's a funny beat that it's like they didn't do.
It was funny
when
she
pops
them
her
coming
head
out
and says, "My savior."
Yes. That was a funny beat there. That was a funny beat there. But no, you're right. There could have been more there. There could have been a little more, but I guess part of that would come down to we haven't established that Barrow is anyone worth listening to. Yeah. And again, we had the moment earlier too when it was just Barrow and Edison. That little confrontation there, where we have been shown nothing that would make any of these characters be willing to listen to him. Because that's always a thing for the bad guy, right? It's like, listen, you just don't understand my perspective. This is what, just give me a chance. If we talk, I can get you on my side. And that's obviously going to be Barrow's motivation. But from what we've seen, Edison, it's clearly he would be like, I don't want anything to do with people like you. So the fact of him being in the room with Barrows and having that conversation, again, there was the motivation for that just quite hadn't been laid. And as the reader, again, not having been shown any reason to care about what he says, even if he's telling the truth, right? Which in that case he was. He was like, Willow wants to bring gravity back, and you know what that means for you. So he's not lying about it. I don't care that he's lying or telling the truth or whatever. I don't care about anything he has to say about anything. They haven't established that yet. So you're right. There could have been something cool there where we got a moment of the quote unquote hero and villains having to team up, because regardless of what you want and regardless of what I want, what these other people want is to destroy the city, Right. And if that happens, everybody loses. And we got to stop that first. And once we stop that, then we can go back to our thing, but our thing doesn't matter if the city is burnt to the ground. So let's team up and stop that. And that seemed like where it was going. And you're right. It was like 2 pages and it was gone. So, we'll see how that ends up. Yeah.
It's, I'm not allowing myself to feel like frustrated or disappointed in what it's not. I'm trying to enjoy it for what it is. And there's so much good, if you take that vantage point. So it's kind of one of those, like, don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good in this book.
I think that's a good perspective on this book, because it is a lot of fun. And again, at the very least, and again, I'm not knocking Joe Henderson as a writer or as a creative, but like at the very least, this is a book I can just flip through and look at the character design, look at the creature design, some of the splash pages. There's one scene that I love during the flashback on the farm, like I guess after the bugs had killed all the livestock and a bunch of people there. And you just see him kind of sitting in a hallway, like his head is down, but above them, like a bunch of random parts and viscera are floating. But like you can feel his sorrow in that moment, right? You can feel 100%. His, and yet it's this kind of disgusting scene of we just had this giant battle with these humongous, I guess these are the mosquitoes or whatnot. But just visually, I think the book is stunning. I'm reminded like every third page why I love the way Lee Garbett draws characters. I so much enjoy it, which is part of the reason why I'm really looking forward to more of this Daredevil run he's doing with Stephanie Phillips. Just because
it feels like it's been an eternity between issues 1 and 2. Like I'm so jonesing for the next one.
I know. But I love his work so much. And again, this was the book that was like, oh, this is someone I need to pay attention to, this is someone whose work I need to follow. It came out of this book. So even with some of the nitpicks story-wise, which again, I some I share with you, some I don't, but I can't deny that they're not there. Even without that, this book I think is super enjoyable because just visually, I think it's gorgeous. Absolutely gorgeous.
All right. Well, I'm eager to see how it wraps up. I have not read ahead, so I'm going to be entering volume 3 with fresh eyes, open mind, knowing it's the end, I guess, which is the only restriction
that's the only little bummer when you're right, when like, oh, I only got 3 volumes of this. So as you said earlier, that anticipation of you're judging this book differently, fair or not, because you know how many issues it goes. You know how many volumes you got. You know how much story there is to start with. So, but again, that's kind of the premise of this whole show, right? Like we're looking at completed works.
And it's hard. I think we don't say that enough. We did, I think, early on is like comics are hard, especially endings.
Endings are tough.
And when something like has that transcendent level experience, it's incredibly rare. And I think we miss that because this podcast only does the things that generally like absolutely crush it out of the park. On any given week, that is one of 40 titles on the rack. And many of them don't get the ending they deserve. So through editorial changes or marketing changes or COVID or whatever.
Through the fault of 1,000 possibilities.
It's just a brutal industry. Yet so many great things emerge. So anyway, looking forward to next week, read volume 3, and we will see you back here for the conclusion next week. Fix the World.
Peace.
That's what it's called. That's what I was looking for. All right, Fix the World next week.
Peace.